Some people were called mature when they were actually just careful. They learned early that being easy to manage was safer than being fully alive. They were the kid who did not need much, or at least the kid who understood very quickly that needing much came with a cost. So they became quiet in the right moments, helpful in the right moments. Small, observant, undemanding, and strangely good at reading the room. Adults praised them for being wise beyond their years. What no one noticed was how much fear can look like wisdom from the outside. Being mature too early does something subtle to a person. It teaches them to build a self around control before they ever learn what safety feels like. They start confusing composure with worth. They feel proud of needing little, even while something inside them goes painfully untouched. Maybe they were the child who comforted their mother, the one who watched their father's mood before speaking, then edited themselves to keep the peace. Maybe nobody screamed, maybe nobody hit them, but the emotional atmosphere still taught them that other people's feelings mattered faster than their own. So they learned to anticipate instead of express, to manage instead of feel, to become the reliable one before they ever got to become the child. And that pattern follows them into adulthood with remarkable efficiency. It shows up so smoothly that it can pass for character, discipline, or emotional strength. They are the friend who always answers, the coworker who stays late without being asked, then says it is fine even when their body is begging for rest. They are the partner who notices every shift in tone, the sibling everyone leans on, the person who can hold a crisis together while quietly falling apart in private. From the outside, they seem solid, but inside, they are often scanning, bracing, and translating everyone else before they even know what they feel themselves. That is one of the hidden costs. You become so good at adapting that your own inner life starts arriving late. Someone asks how you are doing, and your mind goes blank. Not because nothing is there, but because you were trained to look outward first. You know when other people are upset within seconds, but your own sadness can sit in your chest for hours before it even gets a name. This is why some deeply responsible adults feel strangely disconnected from themselves. They were not raised to ignore emotion on purpose, but to postpone it for survival. When you had to be the calm one, your feelings became background noise. Other people's needs became the emergency channel. That child grows up and still feels uneasy when life gets too quiet. Rest feels unfamiliar because their nervous system learned to organize itself around vigilance. So even on a free evening, they keep moving. Cleaning a kitchen that is already clean, answering texts, fixing small problems, doing anything except fully landing. Then they call themselves lazy for feeling tired, which is another hidden cost of growing up too soon. You become exhausted in ways that are hard to explain. Not dramatic exhaustion, but a private kind that lives behind competence. It is the fatigue of always being available. The weariness of being the one who notices, remembers, prevents, softens, and absorbs. And because you have worn capability for so long, people rarely question it. They assume your strength is natural, not expensive. But strength that forms too early usually comes with a secret contract. I will be easy, and maybe I will still belong. That contract does not disappear when childhood ends. It simply changes rooms. Now it lives at work, where you volunteer before anyone asks. It lives in relationships, where you apologize for having needs before speaking them out loud. It lives in the way you say sorry for taking up time, sorry for being upset, sorry for not knowing, sorry for needing help. Sometimes the most mature-looking person in the room is the one who still feels guilty for existing in an inconvenient way. They are not weak, they are deeply conditioned. This conditioning can make self-respect feel strangely selfish. Boundaries feel rude, rest feels earned, and receiving care feels vaguely dangerous. Because receiving care means becoming visible, and becoming visible once carried risks. If you were only loved when you were composed, useful, or low maintenance, then openness can feel like exposure. Even kindness can make your body tense. That is why some people freeze when someone is gentle with them. They do not know whether to trust it, repay it, or prepare for it to disappear. They might smile when help is offered, then immediately say, "You don't have to." Not because they do not need it, but because needing it feels too revealing. This is where the pattern gets heartbreaking. The person who gives the most support often feels the least entitled to receive it. They can sit with another person's grief for hours, but when their own pain comes up, they minimize it in under 30 seconds. They tell themselves other people have it worse. They tell themselves it is not a big deal. What they often mean is, I never learned how to hold my pain without feeling ashamed of it. A child who becomes emotionally mature too early usually learns one core lesson. My feelings are manageable only if they do not inconvenience anyone. So they become skilled at shrinking distress into acceptable shapes, a headache instead of grief, busyness instead of fear, irritability instead of loneliness. By adulthood, this can look like emotional mystery, but it is often emotional delay. They are not cold, they are just used to processing their feelings after everyone else has left the room. This shows up in conflict too. In the moment, they stay calm, agreeable, even thoughtful. Then 3 hours later, the truth appears in a tight throat, a racing mind, and the sentence they could not say when it mattered. Actually, that hurt. But by then, they often decide it is too late. So the feeling gets folded back in, where many old feelings are already waiting. That pile becomes a life, not an explosive one, but a quietly overmanaged one. You handle everything. You function well. You seem mature. Yet somewhere underneath, resentment starts gathering around unlived reactions, around all the moments when your body asked to speak and your conditioning answered first. This is why early maturity can create adults who are admired and unknown at the same time. Everyone trusts them, but few people truly meet them. Not because they are hiding on purpose, because self-erasure became socially graceful. They know how to be pleasant when hurt, productive when depleted, understanding when disappointed. And after years of doing this, they may not even call it self-abandonment. They call it being realistic, stable, or just not dramatic. But there is a difference between emotional steadiness and emotional self-removal. One is maturity, the other is adaptation that never got updated. Real maturity can include tenderness. It can include saying, "I need a minute, I cannot do that today," or "I am not okay." Forced maturity usually skips that part. It performs control while hiding the cost. That cost can show up in relationships in painfully specific ways. You become easy to rely on and hard to get close to. You may listen deeply but reveal very little. You may crave intimacy, then tighten the moment someone gets emotionally near. Part of you wants to be chosen without effort. Another part does not trust love that requires no performance. So you may overgive before you are asked. You may become helpful, thoughtful, deeply attentive, and still feel unseen. Because being valued for what you do can feel safer than being known for who you are, especially if usefulness was your first form of protection. This can also create confusing loneliness. You are surrounded by people who appreciate you, yet something in you still feels untouched. Not because people never cared, because they mostly met the version of you that knew how to manage everyone else. And that version is impressive, but it is not the whole person. The whole person is often sitting underneath a competence with very old questions. What happens if I stop holding everything together? Who am I if I am not the strong one? Will anyone stay if I become less convenient? Those questions do not come from vanity. They come from a childhood where love, approval, or peace may have felt tied to your regulation. When children become the stable one too early, they often develop hyper-responsibility. They feel accountable for moods, outcomes, timing, and tension that were never theirs to carry. So even as adults, they feel a strange guilt when someone is disappointed, even when they did nothing wrong. A boundary can ruin their afternoon. A simple no can feel like a moral failure. Their body may react as if they have caused harm, when in reality they have only interrupted access. That is not cruelty. That is nervous system history. It is the old fear that other people's discomfort will become your burden, so you rush to smooth, explain, reassure, and repair. Sometimes before anyone even asked. Sometimes before you even know what you believe. This is why people who matured too early often struggle with desire. Not ambition, but desire. They know how to do what is needed. They know how to be useful, effective, dependable, and appropriate. But ask what they want, and the answer can feel strangely distant. Desire was a luxury in an environment where adaptation mattered more. When your attention is trained around keeping things steady, wanting can feel disruptive, preference can feel selfish, pleasure can feel unearned. So they become adults who could organize everyone else's birthday dinner but cannot answer where they want to eat. They know how to support joy better than inhabit it. This is also why rest can feel so emotionally loaded. Rest is not just stopping. For someone who grew up too fast, rest can feel like dropping the role that kept them safe. And without the role, an old unease rises. If I am not producing, helping, anticipating, or improving, what justifies my place here? That question exhausts people long before the calendar does. Then there is the grief nobody talks about. The grief of realizing your maturity was expensive. Not fake, not worthless, but expensive. It gave you skills, insight, and strength. But it may have cost you spontaneity, softness, and trust. It may have cost you the right to be messy at the age when messiness was normal. It may have cost you the freedom to discover yourself without first scanning the room. And that grief matters, because if you only praise your resilience, you will miss what your resilience had to replace. There is nothing noble about a child becoming emotionally older than their years because the environment left them no better option. It may look admirable, but admiration is not the same as care. This is the reframe many people need. You were not mature because you were untouched by pain. You were mature because pain taught you to organize yourself early. That deserves compassion, not romanticizing. And compassion here is important, because many people who grew up too fast are still secretly hard on themselves for not being lighter now. They think, I should be more open by now. I should know how to relax, ask for help, trust people, and stop overthinking everything. But patterns built in childhood do not leave because you criticize them. They loosen when you finally understand what they were trying to protect. Your overfunctioning was not random. Your silence was not emptiness. Your self-control, your caution, your need to stay useful, your difficulty receiving, all of it once made profound sense. That is why shaming it never works. What begins to help is seeing the pattern clearly, not as identity, but as history still moving through the present. When you notice yourself saying yes while your chest tightens, that is information. When you feel guilty after a reasonable boundary, that is information too. When someone asks what you need and you instantly say, I'm good, before checking, that is also information. It is not failure. It is a doorway. Because the opposite of forced maturity is not becoming reckless. It is becoming honest enough to include yourself. It is letting your inner life count before it becomes an emergency. It is learning that calmness is not the same thing as self-betrayal. It is discovering that being dependable is beautiful, but being unreachable is costly. That being thoughtful is generous, but being absent from yourself is not peace. Little by little, a different kind of adulthood becomes possible. One where strength does not require self-erasure. One where you can be kind without overextending, present without performing, loving without becoming responsible for everyone's emotional weather. You may still be the steady one, but now steadiness can include honesty. Now it can include saying, I am tired, I need support, that hurt me, I cannot carry this alone. And if those sentences feel awkward, that does not mean they are wrong. It usually means they were missing for a long time. The hidden cost of being mature too early is not just exhaustion. It is how long you can live without realizing you are allowed to have a self too. A self with needs, limits, preferences, tenderness, confusion, anger, and unfinished feelings. A self that does not have to earn care by staying composed. So if you have spent years being the calm one, the strong one, the easy one, it makes sense that you feel older in some ways and undernourished in others. You learned how to survive before you learned how to arrive, and those are not the same thing. Real adulthood is not proving how little you need. It is being able to stay connected to yourself while life asks things of you. Maybe that is the deeper truth. You were never meant to become unbreakable. You were meant to become whole, and wholeness has room for the parts of you that got too quiet while trying to grow up.